How's it going, fellas cinephiles? This is Dominic from Film Overload, the channel where we talk about movies, pop culture, and everything in between. We are back with another video, and today I am going to be doing part 2 of the MCU ranking. If you've not seen part 1, the first part will be up here in the notes or in the description down below. But the last part, the first part of this mini-series was I ranked from number 22 all the way up to number 12. So now this second part will deal with number 11 all the way up to number 1. These last 11 movies, in my opinion, are the best of the best, the cream of the crop in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And once again, if your list doesn't line up with mine, that is totally okay. That's the beauty of movies. It is all subjective. These last 11 movies, in my opinion, represent the heart and soul of the MCU. So without further ado, let's move on to part 2. Alright, we are back in our trusty tier list maker. As you can see, I re-edited the tier list exactly the way we left it off back in part 1. And let's get into this. And to kick off part 2, I'm going to be entering the last movie in the mid category. And we're going to start off this video with another pretty hot take on my end. And to round out the mid portion of this tier list, we're going to go with a movie that, personally to me, ended the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is Avengers Endgame. Look, I know exactly what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're about to type, but hear me out. Just hear me out. I remember seeing this movie like it was yesterday. Packed audience. It was an IMAX. Just a great experience in the movie theater. And I left that first screening feeling really good about what I watched. However, after a couple of rewatches, this movie just does not really hold up the way I thought it was going to. Yes, do we get closure in this film? Yes. Do we get some really cool character moments? Yes. Do we get some just really solid moments in general? Yes, we do. But after rewatching this a couple of times, I tend to notice that there's a lot more cracks in this movie than there once was when I first watched it for the first time. First off, let's start with this. I really believe that this film, this film, in my opinion, really began the main problem that the MCU faces now. And that is time travel. There are numerous ways to do time travel, and unfortunately, the time travel that they did in this film just does not work for me. With Tony developing that machine and they can just go back in time whenever they want, it really opened up the door for some really stupid decisions that they could do down the road that could ultimately, sacrifice the MCU's timeline, in my honest opinion. The multiverse stuff and the different dimensions and all the things that they tried to pack into this movie, sure, for the time was cool. But when you think about it now, those very things are the reason why the MCU is failing. Sure, it's the awful character development that they do nowadays. Sure, it's the awful writing. Sure, it's the awful storytelling. But it's because of the time travel and the multiverse and all that stuff that makes it bad now. And Endgame introduced to us all of that crazy time travel stuff. Yes, we got more of it in Loki. Yes, we got more of it in other shows. But Endgame was the movie to introduce us to that kind of stuff. So in my opinion, Endgame is kind of the reason why the MCU is the way it is now, because of the overuse of time travel, because of all of those different multiverses and things like that. So that's the first problem. The second problem is I feel like this film did not have a solid structure. In my opinion, the story, while actually very, very well thought out, I thought the story was a little lackluster, especially after a couple of rewatches. There isn't really a main character in this film. All the Avengers are kind of the main characters. But in my opinion, there's so many characters that need payoffs that you don't really have time to soak in some of those payoffs because you're trying to focus on so many different characters and elements. But after rewatching this, it is so clear that there's just way too much going on. You don't get time to appreciate all of those payoffs because you're trying to keep focused and keep track of so many different characters, and you're trying to, piece everything together. And while some characters got some massive payoffs, some characters didn't really get as big of a payoff as I thought they deserved. And that's, I don't know. I just feel like there's just way too much going on to really soak in all the characters' payoffs. Yes, you know who they are inside and out because you watched all the previous films. You watched all of those previous films. But because your brain is going all over the place, you don't really have time to focus on all of these payoffs that are happening in front of your eyes. Some payoffs were, I thought, okay, that was all right. Some payoffs were done really well. Another hot take of mine, the Iron Man payoff, while tear-jerking, I thought they could have handled that maybe a little bit better, but that's just me. Yes, we get Captain America wielding Mjolnir. Yes, we see the portals. Yes, we see the grand conclusion with Thanos. We see all of it. And I'm not saying this film is bad. I thought it was a very, very solid send-off, but I feel like this send-off could have been a lot better. There were things that I just thought could have been handled better, and they really tried to make this grand ending. In my opinion, they did that. I mean, the box office proved that they did that. But after a couple of rewatches, the movie just does not hold up as well as I thought it was going to, which is why it is the final film in the mid portion of this tier list and my number 11. All right, moving on to the high tier portion of this tier list. There's going to be 4 films in this tier right here. And these films, in my opinion, are really, really solid, but not peak MCU. And to kick off the high tier portion of this tier list, I go back to a film that I think personally could be the most underrated film in the MCU, and that is the first Ant-Man film. When this film first came out, I had very big doubts about this film. The trailers were not great. The villain looked stupid. It just did not look very appealing until I saw this film in my movie theater, and oh my gosh, this film is so much fun. I mean, so much fun. It's like a comedy / thriller / heist movie, I guess, if you want to call it. But a great introduction to Scott Lang as a character. We get to meet Hank Pym. We get to meet his daughter Hope. We get to see, Yellow Jacket and all of his wrongdoings, which ultimately leads to the fight at the end. We get to see all of the Ant-Man suits and how he controls the suits. We get to see all of the really fun sidekick characters in this film, like T.I. and Michael Pena and all of those fun side characters. This film perfectly balances superhero, heist, and comedy. It balances all 3 of those elements so well. I really dug the story. Even though I would have preferred Hank Pym to be the Ant-Man in the MCU, I think Scott was an interesting choice, and I think it worked thanks to Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd is the heart and soul of this film, and I really thought he was arguably the best part of this film. I thought that his chemistry with everyone else was really good. I thought the script was really well written as well. I thought Peyton Reed's direction was very solid. But going back to Yellow Jacket, I thought that he was a little bit lackluster. I think for the most part, he was probably like a middle-of-the-road villain. I wouldn't say he's the worst villain, but he definitely wasn't the best villain. His motives were a little bit weak, and I wish they would have done a little bit more with his character, but it is what it is. But I really dug the first Ant-Man film. I, again, really enjoyed the story. very funny. The humor landed very well. I really enjoyed just the overall like aesthetic of the film. I really loved the characters and their chemistry and how it all just kind of came together to make a really fun heist comedy. And that is why Ant-Man is my very first film in the high tier and my number 10. At number 9, I have a film that is from Phase 1, and in my opinion, they should have kept the tone from this movie throughout the entirety of the trilogy. And I am talking about the very first Thor movie. This film is actually good. I've seen so many tier lists where this film was like at the very bottom or like the bottom tier or low tier, and there's just simply no way this film can be low tier. Well, in my opinion, this film is so solid. We get to see Asgard for the first time on the big screen. We get to see the dynamic between Odin, Thor, and Loki. You can see the jealousy brewing in Loki because Odin favors Thor, but when Thor eventually angers Odin, he gets sent down to Earth, and we get to meet, Jane and all of her friends and try and figure out where Thor comes from and how he adapts to human life instead of like godly life. And I really dug the polar opposites because Thor is so used to like this high godly stature, and here's Jane who's like just your average human. And when both of those things clash, yes, there's a romance between the two of them eventually, but Hemsworth plays such a stoic Thor, a very cocky, a very arrogant Thor, and that's the Thor we should have gotten throughout the entirety of the MCU until we got Ragnarok, where they just threw that out the window and he just turned into a complete joke, which I thought was awful. But the first Thor movie is really solid. We get to see Thor really dig deep and really think about, what he truly believes in and what he really wants to do. He's so up on pleasing his father, but he goes overboard and he realizes, hey, I have to learn how to calm myself in order to fulfill all these things I need to do. And through the help of Jane and others, he learns how to control that arrogance. He learns to control that cockiness. And you see this character development throughout the entirety of the film. And then we get Loki and all of his plans to do all of the things that he has to do. This film is really fun. I actually enjoy this film a lot. Oh, and also we get to see the MCU debut of Hawkeye in this film. And just little cool things like that. Shield finding a Mjolnir in the random desert. It's just things like that that make this film what it is. So once again, this first Thor movie is really not bad. In fact, in my opinion, it's really, really solid. Solid story. The direction is just great. Just the way the director made this film, you can tell it was made with a lot of passion, in my opinion. The writing was solid. Hemsworth is great. Tom Hiddleston, perfect Loki. The side characters are great. Just everything about this film I thought was really, really well done. It's not great, but it's a really solid entry in the MCU, and that is why I put it at number 9. All right, here's another hot take of mine, and this film is severely overlooked in my opinion. Yes, certain elements to this film do not work as well as most people thought they should have, but for what this film sets up down the road, I very much appreciated this film, especially after a couple of rewatches. And coming in at number 8, I have Avengers: Age of Ultron. Is Ultron handled in the best way possible? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Is Bruce and Natasha's romance totally forced? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. However, those two elements I push aside because if you really break down this film sets up a lot of things. A lot of things. Let's see here. It introduces the Mind Stone. Well, technically it does not introduce the Mind Stone, but it introduces the Mind Stone outside of Loki's scepter. We see the introduction of Wanda and Pietro. We see the Maximoffs, and we see how they're being used ultimately by Ultron to totally, completely annihilate Earth and turn the Earth into Ultron's playpen, basically, because he wants to take over the world with himself. And so we see the introduction of the Maximoffs, and we really see for the first time this underlining tension within the group, especially after the first Avengers film, when we really got to see for the first time, just some of like the banter between certain characters. Well, this film really shows the crack that was starting to develop in the group itself, especially after when Wanda does her thing on all of them. And that's really why Tony, well, that's not the reason why Tony decided to build Ultron, which in my opinion should have been Hank, but the reason why Tony built Ultron was so that he could prevent a New York situation. He tries to tell Bruce, this is the way. This is the only way to do this. And so Bruce, helps him build Ultron, and things go absolutely crazy. Things go really, really wrong. And we see, Thor having this vision, so to speak, of, that sequence where all the stones kind of gather in this golden cloud that resembles a gauntlet. We see all these like these foretellings of what is going to happen eventually down the road. And through Thor's vision, he creates, well, the Vision. And we see Vision for the first time and him interacting with all the superheroes. And we see, sure, the end battle was not the greatest. Should they have killed Quicksilver so fast? No, that was kind of dumb also. But what I'm trying to say is the film really has a lot of things going for it. Unfortunately, people just see how Ultron was treated in Bruce and Natasha's relationship, but I think that's just the wrong way of looking at this film. There's so much more than those two elements. Sure, were those two elements very off-putting? Absolutely. But there's so much character work going on here that people just refuse to see. Once again, we see the very first fragments and the very first cracks in the team itself thanks to Wanda. We see how eventually certain ideals and certain morals are going to divide them eventually, leading into Civil War. And you can just tell that there's something there that wasn't there. And that's what I appreciate about this film the most. There's so much character work in this film that people just do not see or refuse to see because of, again, the way they treated Ultron, Bruce and Natasha's relationship. And you know what? I understand that. Those are very off-putting elements. But to say that everything else is bad because of those two elements is just weird, in my opinion. Once again, there's so much character work in this film. Was it done the best? No. But there's so much character work in this film, and that's what I appreciated about this film the most. Was the writing as good as the first Avengers? No, nowhere near as good as the first Avengers. But it was enough to really get people invested, in my opinion, and just showing the character work. And I keep saying that because it's true. The characters really carry this film, in my opinion. And once again, that's what I appreciate about this film the most. The story was good. It was not great. It was good. They could have done a lot better, again, with Ultron. But the story, I thought, was enough to really push it over, in my opinion, and as well as, once again, the fantastic character work. So, Age of Ultron is in the high tier portion of this tier list, and my number 8. At number 7, I have a film that, in my opinion, is once again a very, very solid entry in the MCU. And just like Age of Ultron, I see the problems that people had with this film, but in my opinion, this film is a very fun ride. And when I saw it in theaters for the first time, I just really enjoyed it. I had a great time seeing this when it came out. And at number 7, I have Spider-Man Homecoming. Yes, is he Tony's son practically? Yes, I know that annoys a lot of people, myself included. But what director John Watts did with this film, I thought was very, very well done. Is there some story problems? Just some. Not a lot, but some. Once again, I did not like the fact that Peter was basically Tony's son. I thought that was very weird because everyone knows Spider-Man for being, everyone's favorite friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And we got that for a brief moment. But what I appreciate the most about this film is that this film perfectly captures that high school atmosphere that we all associate Peter Parker with. It captures that really awkward high school experience that everyone has. And that's what Peter goes through in this film and in the comics. He's a very, young character, and we see him in high school. And this film perfectly captured, in my opinion, that high school atmosphere that I think a lot of attempts on Spider-Man were just slightly lacking in. I dug the Maguire high school atmosphere, but this just felt like a very fresh look at a high school atmosphere, and I kind of liked that for Peter Parker. But I thought this film was a lot of fun. This film, in my opinion, is a lot of fun. A very solid story. This takes place after Civil War. Peter is all excited that he's an Avenger now. We see Michael Keaton's Vulture, which I thought was really, really cool and really well done, I thought. The Zendaya character, a little The Liz character, she's all right. Ned is hilarious. Those two characters together were just so much fun to watch, and just, and we get to see Peter really become a hero. Tony has that great line in the movie where he says, "If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it." And that line I thought that was a great line. And that really changed Peter's character arc for the better, in my opinion. He really goes out of his way then to try and prove to Tony that he can do this by himself. And he goes on an adventure to do so. And I really dug this film. It was funny. It was charming. It was witty. Again, solid character work. I loved the end sequence between Spider-Man and Vulture. I thought that was really well done. Their fight together was really solid. I loved all the MCU references, that were thrown around. This film is a lot of fun, and I really loved a lot about this film. Sure, there was a couple things that I was like, okay, that was kind of weird. But this film is so much fun. Again, I really do understand that people wanted that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man feeling and not having Peter be practically Tony's son, which, again, I totally agree about that. But once again, that one element did not ruin the whole film for me. I really enjoyed this film a lot. I could watch this film all day and all night, and that is why Spider-Man Homecoming is my number 7. We have finally made it to the top tier portion of this tier list. Spider-Man Homecoming ended the high tier portion, and now we are in my opinion, the cream of the crop of the MCU. And to kick off the top tier portion of this tier list, I'm going to go to the movie that, quite frankly, started it all, and that is 2008's Iron Man. What more can be said about this film? You have AC/DC, you have Robert Downey Jr., You have Gwyneth Paltrow, and their chemistry is just amazing. We get to see Tony being captured and then escaping the cave with the very first Iron Man suit, the Mark 1. We get to see his brain kick into full gear and realize that, hey, this suit could be something one day, and boy, is it ever. And we get to see him really build up the industry, build up Stark Industries. There's all this pressure on his shoulders to really perform, and that's why he kind of goes into a period of drinking and all this stuff. And you really see, once again, just great character work through the unbelievable performance of Robert Downey Jr. We get to see Jeff Bridges, and we get to see, Ironmonger. We get to see all that stuff. This film started everything. Without this film, we wouldn't be talking about all of these films today. If this movie flopped, none of this would have happened. None of this. This film is so much fun. We get to see Tony dive deep into himself and all of his morals and beliefs, and we really get to see just how much there is in his brain. But not only his brain, but his heart as well. There's so much in this character, and Robert brought that to the table so well, and that's why this franchise is still going today. It was this first movie that really took this universe to the stratosphere. The CGI for 2008 was really solid, and it holds up really well in my opinion, especially if you have the 4K disc or a Blu-ray disc. It really holds up quite well. Once again, you have AC/DC backing you up with the soundtrack. We get to see all these really cool fight scenes. We really get to see Obadiah kind of show the audience what he wants to do with Tony's company, and he'll do anything to get it. And that's when Tony fights back and obviously conquers Ironmonger. And then the classic line at the end where he goes, "The truth is, I am Iron Man." And then you hear Black Sabbath's Iron Man. So perfect. That's how that ending is so good. It's so good. This movie brings back so many memories. Again, I was 9 years old when this film came out, and I probably saw it a little too early than I was supposed to, but I remember this was the film that really made me go, whoa. and this film has a very special place in my heart. I love this film so much. That is why it's beginning the top portion of this tier list and my number 6. We have finally entered the top 5 of the MCU in my honest opinion, and at number 5 is a film that I could watch all day. I'm talking about Captain America, the First Avenger. This film is fantastic. If you are, a comic book buff, a history buff even, or just a superhero buff in general, this film has it all. We meet a scrawny Steve Rogers from Brooklyn, and we get to see his want right away. He wants to join the army, and he wants to prove that he's not just some scrawny guy from Brooklyn. And this doctor sees that drive in him, that heart in Steve, and he gives him the opportunity of a lifetime, and he takes it and changes his life forever. There is so much good stuff going in this film. I thought director Joe Johnston knocked this film out of the park, and this film feels very similar to another film that Joe Johnston did, and that was Disney's The Rocketeer. If you play these two films side by side, both of them have very similar feelings, and both have very similar pacing and a very similar atmosphere and feel for some reason. But it makes sense though, because same director. But this film really shows the heart of Captain America. Captain America is one of those characters that I think everyone tries to aspire to be. I think he's one of those guys that that he is trying to do the right thing all the time, and eventually that leads him down the path of kind of butting heads with Tony later on in the MCU, and then we obviously lead to Civil War. But Steve's morals are there, and you see that he's willing to sacrifice himself, especially in that one scene where a Tommy Lee Jones character throws like a bomb, and he covers himself first so that everyone else can survive. And right away, you know who Steve Rogers is. He's a guy out to protect people. Steve goes on this journey after that, and yes, he finds himself in the war. At first, not in the way he thought he was going to, but he finds himself in the war eventually. He finds love. He finds this satisfaction that he finally has done what he's always wanted to do. He rescues Bucky from Hydra. He breaks into Hydra. He finds out that the Red Skull is behind all of these crazy things. He finds that they're wanting to bomb all these different parts of the world, and he sees New York, and he can't let that happen. We get introduced to the Tesseract in this film, the Space Stone. Red Skull wants the Space Stone, and ultimately, everything goes crazy after that through the Space Stone or the Tesseract. But Steve can't let that bomb detonate New York, and that's why we see him land in the ice and sacrifice himself for all of those people. All of those people. There's such a patriotism, so to speak, in this film. And if you don't like, getting bashed in the head with patriotism and things like that, this film might be a little triggering, but it's such a good film. It's a great film. A story about a man who just wants to do the right thing and feels like he needs to do something to make the world a better place. Steve, there's so many layers to Steve Rogers, especially in the MCU, thanks to Chris Evans and his performance. I think that Chris is Captain America. You can never replace him with anyone else. And what Chris brought to this role is just something outstanding, and in my opinion will never be duplicated ever. This film is fantastic. I love this film. Alan Silvestri's wonderful theme song for Captain America and the wonderful score is just something that I'll always remember. I love this film. This film is a great entry in Phase 1. I love this film so much, and that is why this film is my number 5. At number 4, we have a film that completely shocked me and the audience I was with when we all saw this opening night, and arguably one of the best comic book films ever made, and that is Avengers: Infinity War. Infinity War is one of those films that had a lot of buzz around it. A lot of buzz. People were excited to see this film, and I remember just the anticipation of opening night. I remember it like it was yesterday. Just so much energy in that theater when I saw it for the first time. And I remember the lights went out and not a single breath was heard. It was dead silent. Dead silent. You see all of Thor's people lying on the ground. You hear the great monologue of Ebony Maw, and you see the Mad Titan for the first time, and Loki, and Thor is just battered and bruised, and you see Hulk fight Thanos, and you go, yes, this is awesome. And then you just see Hulk get his butt kicked and sent to Earth. And that's how the ball rolls. It is, that opening sequence is so well done. So well done. And once again, this film has so much character work because, again, this film takes place when everyone is divided. Everyone is still divided from the events of Civil War. And to see all of these heroes reunite once again in various different ways was something very, very special. We see the character work in Thanos. This is truly Thanos' movie. If you really break down this film, this is Thanos' movie. He's the main character. The characters that we used to call main characters are the side characters in this movie, if you really think about it, which I thought was brilliant. Make this film from the POV of the big bad. And that method worked so well. This was Thanos' story. And it was the very first time that audiences saw the Avengers lose. That great sequence on Wakanda when Thor throws his axe right in Thanos' chest. And Thanos says the words where, "You should have gone for the head." And then snaps. And you hear Thor scream, "No!" And when Thanos snapped his fingers, you could hear a pin drop in my theater. Everyone's jaw was on the ground. We all sat there like, what did we just see? And you see people slowly, wilt away in the dust. And yes, of course, you have the Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good Spider-Man moment that everyone just loves for some reason. But that film, the film is so good. Once again, we see all of our favorite characters, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers. We get to see all these characters together for the first time. And it's so cool when all of them kind of assemble for the first time. It's so good. It's so good. The story is fantastic. Marcus and McFeely should have been nominated for adapted screenplay that year. I really believe that. I really believe Marcus and McFeely should have been nominated for their adapted screenplay. I think it's that good. The character work is fantastic. Alan Silvestri's score. All the different payoffs, all the different moments in this film just work so well. It works so well. This film is, I wouldn't say perfect, but this film is very near perfect. I love this film to pieces, and that is why Avengers Infinity War is my number 4. At number 3, I have a film that I absolutely loved when I first saw it for the first time, and I've loved it every single rewatch I've done of this film. And at number 3, I have the very first Guardians of the Galaxy. When this film was announced, I was like, okay, who the heck are these guys? I've never heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy before. They look goofy. It looks goofy. The movie looked weird. Just the trailer wasn't that great. The music was cool, but the trailer was kind of You know what? But boy, was I wrong. When I first saw this film, I was just taken back by it. I love the story of how these characters band together somehow and form this group. We get introduced to the Power Stone in that orb that Peter finds, and that's when everything goes wrong for this character. And for the rest of the film, that's what really gets the ball rolling. I love Peter Quill's character arc. I think Gamora is really cool. Drax is hilarious. Rocket's hilarious. Groot is just, Groot. And you see these 5 characters travel the galaxy and go on this adventure, and you see them bond and really kind of find common ground, even though all 5 of them come from radically different walks of life. There was a very strong emphasis on family in this film, and it kind of showed. 5 characters who have nothing in common just magically bond and form this really fun, charming, witty group, and I just loved that. The story I thought was very charming, very funny. James Gunn's direction style is all over this. The writing was really solid as well. Once again, just the character work was just very well done. The humor landed the entirety of the film, which is so hard to do nowadays. Just the soundtrack and just this film is such a vibe. This film is a total vibe. I love Guardians of the Galaxy 1. It's one of my staples in the MCU, and that is why it is my number 3. At number 2, I have a film that ended the very first phase of the MCU perfectly, and that is the very first Avengers movie. This film I remember so vividly. I had just turned 13 years old, like 4 months prior to this film's release. And this film was the very first PG-13 film that I ever saw. And this film is just amazing. It's fantastic. Everything that was built in phase 1 finally came to a head in this movie. You got to see all the characters interact with each other for the very first time. And the film is just magical. From the story and the story structure to the writing to just the characters themselves are just so good. And you see all of these different personalities, morals, and ideals clash together for the first time. And Nick Fury has to figure out a way to have these people work together as a cohesive unit. And we see Loki entering the real world and him causing all this chaos in New York. And, Thor has beef with Loki, obviously still from the first Thor film. And we see just all of these things that take place during this film. And, whether it be just, funny one-liners to really good fight sequences to some really solid alien work through the CGI. I thought the aliens were really well done. I thought that all of the Loki stuff was really well done. Also, his character arc really kind of flourished after this film. And yeah, it's just a great movie. And once again, Alan Silvestri's score, that iconic Avengers theme song, that one shot where the camera spins around the 6 of them is just, I love that shot so much. This is such a good film. I love the first Avengers film. And that's why I think it deserves to be this high on the tier list. I love the first Avengers film, and that is why it is my number 2. And finally, we have come to the apex of the MCU, in my opinion, and the best film in the MCU, in my opinion, is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This film, to me, is perfect. It's in my top 50 of all time. The spy, espionage, thriller vibes that this film gives off is amazing. We see Steve learning more about S.H.I.E.L.D. and more about their ideals and more about just everything about S.H.I.E.L.D. We get that great opening sequence on the ship. We really get to see him develop this relationship, this friendship with Natasha, and they work together to try and solve this mystery of all these different things. We see finally the reveal of the Winter Soldier, played wonderfully by Sebastian Stan. This movie is right out of Ed Brubaker's graphic novel. It really does feel that way. And once again, Marcus and McFeely, their screenplays are so well written and so well structured. Their characters are great. The character work in this is phenomenal. We get to see the big twist that S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually Hydra, which ultimately changes everything. It flips everything Steve believes on its head. And that's when we start to see like an unhinged version of Steve, kind of, because everything he believed in is now a lie. And this film actually tied into the Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, if you guys can remember that show from a while ago. But the episode that aired the week of this movie's release tied into the movie, which was really cool. But this film is so good. It's so good. We get introduced to characters like Sam Wilson, like once again, the Winter Soldier, and just that entire turn, the entire turn of S.H.I.E.L.D. into Hydra, and you don't know who to trust or where to go. And I love that really tense, kind of claustrophobic feeling that this film gives off. I absolutely loved that about this film. The Russo brothers just directed just crazy. They directed it so well, and once again, through Marcus and McFeely's script, this film is just so well handled and so well cared for, and I just love this film. This film is so good. Great story, fantastic writing. The performances are amazing. We get to see Steve try and convince his brainwashed friend that he's not here to cause him harm. He's trying to snap Bucky out of this thing that he is in. And it is just so good. His mission is not to kill his friend like everyone wants him to. He wants to save his friend, which ultimately is one of the side plots of Civil War. So this film is so good. It's so good. I love the 1970s spy espionage thriller heist film. I love that vibe, and this film totally gave me that vibe. This film to me is the apex of the MCU. I love it to pieces, and that is why Captain America, the Winter Soldier, in my opinion, is the apex of the MCU. There you have it, guys. My MCU ranking is complete, and you know what? I want to know. Let me know what your rankings are of the MCU is by commenting down below. I would love to see your guys' ranking of this fantastic movie universe. And if you guys want to see more rankings like this and more forms of content, hit that like button. Also, hit subscribe while you're at it and turn on the post notifications so that you guys can get notified every single time that I post a video. You can follow me on Letterboxd, which is right here. I post all of my movie reviews on Letterboxd, as it helps me keep track of movies that I have watched, movies that I haven't watched, and movies that I will watch. I think you guys would benefit greatly from this app and this website if you are indeed lovers of cinema like myself. As always, guys, happy movie watching. Take care.